Simone, welcome to the Stepsero podcast. Thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
You are the first Italian on the Stepsero podcast, I believe.
Woohoo!
It's plus 70 plus episodes. I never interviewed a fellow Italian before, so I'm really happy. I'm really excited.
Great. Yeah. I'm happy to be the first. See what's up for me today. What have you prepared?
Let's see. We'll go with the flow. But there is one thing, given your expertise in your career, that I honestly want to touch on. And as you know, by design, these episodes are set to last between, let's say, 15 and 20 minutes. So I won't manage to touch on everything, but I'm sure we can get a couple of nuggets of wisdom out of you today.
Absolutely.
Leadership is something that you know very well. It's a very broad concept, but you consult and coach executives and leaders. And I know that you've had a phenomenal career at Google for many years. So I'll reference that a little bit. On this podcast specifically, we discuss a variety of topics that are related to the modern workplace. So we touch on communication, stress management, culture, well-being, and leadership, specifically leadership coaching and communication related to leadership is something that comes up every now and then, more often than not, I would say. So it's a recurring topic. And having you now on the podcast allows me to pick your brain on a couple of things. And the thing that I would want to start on is a very general idea. I'll start broad, but it's the idea of the corporate ladder. So we throw the corporate ladder as a term around quite a bit, and we do it in a I would say in a bit of an abstract way. We think of this corporate ladder as something that is almost impossible to climb, impossible to get to the top of, and it's a bit of a I would say abstract question, but I'd love to understand your view on the corporate ladder. So when I say corporate ladder, what do you think of? What makes you think of it? Is it something very abstract or is it something very practical to you?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And I think it's an outdated concept. And let me explain. When I started Google in 2010, yeah, sure, there was absolutely the concept of ladder. I started as a sales rep, and then you become team lead, and then manager, and senior manager, blah blah blah, and that's properly a ladder. And I think at the beginning of your career, there is such a concept, right? The first few promotions, if you start as a junior position, are indeed like steps up, and that's okay. But today, the corporate world is quite different. It's not just going up. Organizations are flatter, more matrix. And so the ladder is kind of short eventually because you don't lead by climbing steps up and controlling more people with authority, but rather you start leading by influencing others that likely don't report to you. Right. So that's the first big shift, I'd say. There is a ladder, but it doesn't quite matter anymore. Of course, you want to say, okay, I want to be a VP or senior VP, and you got to get promoted. But the reality is not as linear as it used to be. And the second concept is that it's, I don't know if you know the game, but snakes and ladders. It's sort of a board game where if you end up on a tile with a ladder, you go up, but then you may end up on a snake that lets you slide down, right? And careers like that, it's never just climbing. Sometimes, you sit on a step for a while, and sometimes, you kind of slide down because a reorg hits you, etc. But then there's another ladder that brings you up taller than before. So it's really a fluid sort of mechanism process. And, we need to kind of understand that it's not just climbing up. Right. And I know when I received that advice back then, I was like, oh, that's, a justification for me not getting promoted. But the reality, it is like that, right? It's not just climbing up. It's more fluid. So influencing the system and also being aware that it's not just all the way up to the top all the time.
I love how you explained it, and it makes me think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also likely the reason why lots of people, not just executives, but any professional, any, I would say, knowledge worker in a way within any company references this chaos and ambiguity that you encounter in the workplace. And it makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense what you say about the ladder. It's not always a way up, but it's a way up or down. And organizations are becoming flatter. There's no linear path anymore. Is this, you think, the reason why a lot of executives or people managers or anybody in that capacity get or feel stuck at any point in their career? So they go 1,000 kilometers per hour, but
Hmm.
in reality, they feel like they're not actually going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, because they're stuck in an old model where they try to reach a promotion eventually, kind of keep doing the same stuff they've been doing for a long time, and obviously, each step of the way it doesn't work. The old playbook doesn't always apply. When I was my first director at Google told me, "Look, you don't have a career path; you have a career jungle." And that means that you need to kind of catch the opportunity to move from tree branch to tree branch with no seemingly defined path. And I do find that's what my career was, right? And so those that are stuck in a linear concept of career ladder and just subsequent promotion within the same field, they're missing out. And that's normal, right? It's not because they don't know, how to progress, but simply they're viewing the world with an old pair of glasses, if you will. So you just need to update the pair of glasses you're seeing the world with.
Is there anything you can tell us that can somehow help anybody listening zoom out and get out of this jungle in a way?
Yeah. I think it's not working hard anymore. With
Mhm,
AI, everyone can be excellent in their field,
mhm.
right? Any knowledge gap that they may have had or execution gap can be filled by AI. So AI is leveling the playing field. So being just a bit more excellent in what you do is not going to cut it as far as career progression. You need to have a strong, unique perspective that is shaped by your experience, your values as a person, your leadership values, and what you see in the market or in your domain expertise that shapes a unique perspective. Because between two people that are equally skilled or plus minus 5% in this imaginary scale,
Mhm.
they're gonna pick for promotion who has a very strong point of view, and that point of view attracts people, makes people want to follow you even when don't have to. And that's the key, right? Today, you get stuff done when leaders create a following, a genuine following without authority, right? Through influencing. And that makes a difference. So you can be a little bit less skilled in operations or finance or whatever your domain expertise is. But if you can carry people with you and willingly, that's the key for success. And it's a totally different playbook from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, where working hard would just get you there.
So, is it fair to say that your attitude and, let's call it, mentality heavily affects this path through the jungle?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you keep comparing yourself with who's ahead, you're trying to copy someone and you're kind of disregarding what makes you unique. So it's just very different from before. Your identity as a leader, as a person, and how you show up, how you want to be perceived, how you want others to think about you, what do you want others to say about you where you're not in the room. That's a new game, right? And again, sorry, maybe game is not the right word because it's not trying to game the system. These are just new rules. And the foundation is actually building genuine trust relationships where you show up with consistency and people remember you for that. So it's very simple, but at the same time, if you don't see it, right, you keep just working hard and 90 hours a week, burnout, for that incremental little value that you can bring. That's not what people look into the next a candidate for promotion these days, at all levels, by the way, right? Whether you're a sales rep as a started or you're a global director, you want to become a VP, all the same rules apply. Obviously, the context is different, but the rules are the same.
You mentioned promotion before, and the idea of the corporate ladder that is outdated, and it used to be going from promotion to promotion and so on. And something that we touch quite often, I feel, on this podcast with several guests, is the fact that more often than not, you're, let's say, a great individual contributor. You're phenomenal at your job. You get promoted because of that. You enter a people management capacity, leadership capacity. You keep evolving in that formal sense, but no
Mm-hmm.
one prepares you for it. So
Yeah.
you know what to do operationally, but all of a sudden you are in a whole different. I'll use the term game as well. You're in a whole different game, and this is usually not your fault. It's simply the fact that you were used to something else. You are now in covering a different capacity, but what you used to be good at is not necessarily relevant anymore. Do you see this
Mm-hmm.
happening very often in your coaching currently, or have you seen this happen very often back when you were at Google?
Yeah, I think, I lived through it, right? So I moved from individual contributor to managing the team I was part of. And it's one of the toughest transitions ever, right? Arguably, the move from individual contributor to first time manager is really tough. And the secret is, you're being put in that position because the company wants to replicate with your help your results that you
Hmm.
brought as individual contributor, right?
Hmm.
So they want to multiply you. Oh, this guy is great, this girl is great. If we put them in charge of the team, everyone will become like them. That's the hope, right?
Right.
But so in virtue of that, if you continue just being a great sales rep, for example, and having team, people reporting to you, that's not gonna cut it, right? You cannot continue doing the same. So there's a component, and to make it practical, there's a series of things that you need to stop doing and a series of things that you need to start doing, right?
Hmm.
And the hard part is not understanding that, which is pretty basic, but is actually leaving behind things you love doing, right? You probably, if you're a great sales rep, you love being on the phone and closing deals. You need to give that up, not completely, but be maybe on, supporting others that need to close deals on the phone. So you may jump in critical deals, or you need to start coaching them offline differently. And at the same time, you need to pick up tedious work that can be like quota setting or objective setting and other more, interesting stuff and fun stuff, like creating a vision for your team, so on and so forth. But you need to give up something that you likely love. And very few people want to do that and understand that keep doing the same stuff that brought them there is not going to lead them in creating an amazing team. That is a tough transition, right? And then if you become leader of the same team you were part of, that's even tougher because, there may be jealousies or people that look up to you now in a different capacity and imposter syndrome, all sort of things. But
Hmm.
that's another story.
Fair enough. That's super interesting. May I ask, was there anything specifically in your situation that was particularly difficult to unlearn when you got your first promotion, or when you start first managing a team?
Hmm. Yeah. The reality is that not everyone is your buddy anymore. You cannot just have your friends and best friends in the team, and you need to treat everyone with fairness. And fairness is also probably putting some distance between you and the folks that you manage, because you need to have that distance to have the harder conversations, right? That you may not have had before. So that's hard.
Hmm. Would it be easier to let's say just join a company, not know anybody, and present yourself as
Oh,
a lead?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's different sides, right, of this, where you need to earn the trust. You're not known. You need to build your reputation, but frankly, it's much easier.
Speaking of trust, Simone, I know this is also a big topic. You spoke about it. I was lurking around some of your posts on LinkedIn, and it's also a big topic here on the podcast. And you referenced the idea of influencing without, let's call it, a direct reporting or connection within
Hmm.
certain people. Is there anything that you can tell us about building trust and influencing people without having that direct connection?
Yeah. I think the very first step is showing up with genuine curiosity and interest for other people, who they are, their business, and kind of basic human connection. Right? If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you bring it to the context, is first is like being a decent human being to others, be interested in asking questions, not being there to take stuff, offer what you can, or if you don't have anything to offer just yet, as you're building your relationship, just be human, right? Corporate environment doesn't mean like give and take relationship all the time. It can be also just building a network and being genuine and showing a little bit of yourself. So that's the first step. And the second then is consistency. People want to remember you in a certain way, or they form an opinion over time. And if you change the way you behave, depending on which room you're in, with which people you're talking to, or whether you're under pressure or not, you start creating this weird puzzle of you that people cannot quite place the pieces. So they start wondering who's this person, right? Because one day he's in a bad mood, one day he's in a good mood, and then when he's under pressure, he's that, etc. Right? So being consistent will make you remember in a certain way. That's always the same. And remember, you live in your own head 24/7, but people, maybe have a few minutes to think about you, a seconds or a meeting, and then they'll form that opinion that carries through. So you want to be consistent at every interaction. So to add coherent pieces to this puzzle, and so this person, will remember you in a certain way. And then asking yourself, how do I want to be perceived? How do I want to be felt? What do I want people to think about me when I'm not in the room? And I think we touched earlier, and that's really the foundation of trust. No magic formula, but people tend to rush to business conversations, get down to business, let's get stuff done because the results will speak for myself. Sure, they will, but if you don't buy the foundation, you don't build the foundations of work, that's going to be tough.
That makes so much sense, Simone. Like as we are closing and heading towards the end of the conversation, a bit of a philosophical take, if you will. Do you believe it helps to be yourself at work? There's this big
Mm.
discussion, I would say, in the air where people say, well, yes, you should be yourself, but at the same time, like that's not true. That doesn't work in a corporate environment. You shouldn't exactly be yourself. You shouldn't show up exactly as you would show up back home or with your buddies. Do you find that being yourself in a way helps with this idea of being coherent and consistent, or does that take you back?
Yeah, that's such a great question. At Google, for a certain period of time, we were told, bring your whole self to work. And I don't think that's the right thing to do, because your whole self is a complexity of pieces, and not all the pieces should be brought to work. So I think it's a curated version of yourself. That doesn't mean changing the pieces of who you are, but selecting the pieces that you want to bring to a certain situation at work that might be appropriate for work, right? So it's not just being who you are and then say, "Oh, but that's how you are, how I am," right? No, that's not a fair excuse. That's a lazy excuse, actually. You just show up as you are without doing anything, any work. But a curated version of yourself is still true to your identity, right? This is very important. You're not trying to change or fake who you are. Simply, you select some of the traits deliberately and say, here's how I want people to perceive me, right? And also, there are some behaviors that can be learned. I remember when I moved to the States, the first few meetings, I was trying to figure it out to fit in a new situation. And I was very serious when I was introducing myself to stakeholders and other colleagues. And my boss says, look, you look kind of cold. You feel kind of cold when you introduce yourself. You don't smile. It's like, oh, oh, I was trying, I didn't know. So, how do I want to perceive? Well, actually, I want to be perceived as a warmer person. So you make a deliberate effort in trying to be a little bit more smiling, right? And that's not being fake. It's like, oh yeah, people appreciate more when I smile and introduce myself, and something that you don't notice necessarily yourself. So don't bring yourself to work fully. Just curate a version that's still true to who you are, but it's a curated version that you want others to experience as.
Simone, thank you so much. I am very grateful for your time. I hope we can do this
My
soon again.
pleasure. Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.